Welcome to Mediocre Story Time. Chapter 16.5. Asuna plopped down, naked, on the sofa, and glared defiantly at me. "Kirito, hurry up and take your clothes off," she said in an authoritative tone. What we're continuing? It would be stupid if we stopped here. I hurriedly complied. Opening the window indicated by Asuna, I toggled off the option buried deep within the menu. Because of the hurried start, there was no romantic mood to speak of. Sitting on the bed, which was slightly too small for the two of us, we slowly did as much as the system would allow. The dim blue moonlight filtered through the window, casting complex shadows on the bed. Since Salmberg has no marketplace, the townspeople disappeared at night. The only thing that I could hear was the faint whispering of the lake and my alarm-like heartbeat, which seems to echo around the room. By this time, Asuna and I had removed all of our clothing. We had been kneeling on the bed in front of one another for about 2.5 minutes. I couldn't read Asuna's expression as she balled up her fists on her knees and looked down. I thought that I should probably be the one to take the first action in this situation, but not being able to predict the outcomes of any of my choices, I sat in petrified silence. I considered what would happen if I were to yell out, "Sorry," and re-equip minimal clothing at Mach speed before escaping out of the room. Would she say, "I guess it can't be helped," and forgive me when we meet again tomorrow? There's no way she would. Remembering back to the distant past, I was only 14 the first time that I ever logged into SAO. The winter of 8th grade. I don't want to really recall how I was at that time, but I sacrificed all of my sexual energy that starts to awaken in all boys around that age in order to immerse myself into games. As a result, I had never been in a situation where I would be alone with a girl in her room. Obviously, I had also never been naked with a girl before. To tell the truth, I would have liked for Asuna, who I thought was probably a few years older than me, and thus had experience in this area, to take the lead. However, it seems that everyone in SAO, including her, viewed me as being older than I really was. Since I had never denied any of it, there's no way that I could say to her in this situation, "Sorry, but I'm actually... ... I strengthened my resolve. Even if I didn't have the knowledge or the experience, I had never loved or had felt such intense feelings for someone like I have for Asuna. Ever since SAO started, there were numerous times that I was in a situation where I told myself, "You can't run away from here, no matter what." But here I had to muster up greater willpower than that as I extended my right hand and moved my body forward. My fingertip softly touched the gentle curve that was Asuna's shoulder. Her body quivered sharply. I slowly traced a path from the line of her collarbone to the nape of her neck. Asuna let out a soft moan as her eyes closed. The blood rushed to her cheeks, and her eyebrows furrowed. For some time I watched Asuna's responses in secret delight as I touched her all over the place. Slightly excited by her fresh reactions, I went a bit overboard as I kept my fingertip at a point where I was just barely touching her and continued to slowly glide smoothly across her skin. I crawled down her arms, which were firmly hiding both breasts, circled around her stomach, and reversed direction up her arms again. Every time my finger moved, Asuna's body would shake, and a soft moan would leak out. After caressing her entire body, I put my right hand's finger under her small chin and lifted her head up. With my left index finger, I diligently traced her wet, shining, cherry-colored lips. No, not just your finger. A softly blushing Asuna opened her eyes slightly and looked at me pleadingly. Kiss me. ... I silently moved my face closer. Asuna's lips parted slightly, as if they could not wait any longer. But instead of fastening our lips together, I softly poked her lower lip with the tip of my tongue. As if seeking me out, Asuna stuck out her tongue, but I restrained myself and moved to avoid her before softly touching her with the tip of my tongue. Ah. Asuna let out an irritated sound of both anticipation and need as I abruptly plunged my tongue into her mouth. I violently swished my tongue around. The tactile senses in SAO are, just like the sense of taste, pre-programmed and activated in accordance to the situation. When you consider this, then the only conclusion that one can draw is that the feeling of a deep kiss must have been programmed in. Well, it's not like I've ever really experienced that in real life, but an indescribably bewitching feeling assaulted my nerves. My tongue entwined Asuna's, and I forcefully sucked on it as I felt all the strength go out of her body. Her eyes were moist and dim, and she was breathing erratically as I took my tongue out of her mouth and then proceeded to lick down her neck, behind her ear, and the hollow of her collarbone. When I eventually reached the soft valleys that were the top of her breasts, which had been hidden up until now, her whole body leapt and twitched. Her arms gripped tighter together, and she shook her head from side to side. Asuna, move your arms. But, I want to see your breasts, Asuna. I caught her wrists, which were crossed together, and pulled them apart as I slowly licked and sucked my way toward the peak of the white breast that was gradually being revealed. Ah, no. Asuna's arms were finally at her sides as her twin peaks were revealed to my eyes. The swells, which were usually hidden by the loose-fitting knight's clothes and breastplate, were bigger than I had imagined, full and protruding sharply forward. At their tips were a pair of nipples, which were difficult to distinguish from the surrounding area. Standing impertinently in a cone-shaped form, regrettably the entire room was currently bathed in the blue glow of the moonlight, and... Asuna, turn on the light. What? No, don't. Having accepted the rejection of my request, I sucked her left nipple into my mouth. Ah! Ignoring the shrill voice that Asuna let out at the sudden attack, I chewed on the hard nub with my lips as my tongue rolled around the stiff tip. Ah! No, no, no! I firmly held Asuna's right hand that tried to push me away as she cried out, while her body convulsed and moved my left hand to the other breast. I squeezed her peak between my fingers, then gently used the nail of my index finger to stimulate the tip of her nipple. Ah! Oh! As I tortured both breasts, Asuna's convulsions and sweet cries rose in intensity. Going a bit overboard, I bit down on the protruding object in my mouth, and somewhat violently began to chew on it, while at the same time the thumb and index finger of my left hand painfully twisted the other nipple. Oh! No! No way! Asuna's body suddenly stiffened. Her arms, which now encircled the back of my head, tightened their grip. No, I'm with just my breast. Come. She was unable to speak after that, letting out a hoarse, high-pitched cry from the depths of her throat. Asuna twitched and her body jumped once before collapsing against me. She was still breathing heavily, her body intermittently convulsed slightly. Ah, ha, ha. Asuna, just now. Ah, no, it's so embarrassing. I never had anything like that happen until now. Until now? Ah. Asuna ducked her body and looked down in an embarrassed manner. It's nothing at all. Tell me. I moved my left hand over to Asuna's left breast as she leaned against me and grasped her nipple before pulling on it. Ah, no, stop. No more with the breasts. What do you mean by until now? Ah. Asuna spoke haltingly in a crying voice that was once again mixed with sweet moans. About the ethic code off. After I learned about it, I did it a couple times alone. What did you do? Oh, while thinking about Kirito, played with my breasts and down below. Talking about her own fantasies seemed to have increased Asuna's masochistic side. Her breathing was gradually becoming ragged as she clung to me. Down below? Like around here? I gently moved the hand that had been abusing her breast downward. I stroked her tense stomach, then, ever so slowly, moved in the direction. I went over the slight swell of her abdomen, and when my fingertips reached the entrance of the two mounds, Asuna gasped as her body shook. Ah, no. I used the index finger and middle finger of my left hand to stimulate the area around her vagina. While taking care not to touch the center, I enjoyed the sensation of squeezing the two mounds together, then pulling them apart. Ah, ha, Asuna knelt down, putting both of her arms around me, and moaned, while burying her face in my neck as my fingers moved about, causing her body to jump and twitch. Ah, there, no. But the voice gradually became hoarse as she shook her head and wiggled her whole body. Ah, that can't. Thinking that I was teasing her too much, I gradually moved my middle finger towards the center. As Asuna let out a remarkably loud cry, my finger was enveloped in a slimy sensation. The place was seemingly endless, so hot, moist, and indescribably soft that I involuntarily stirred it with two fingers. Ah, no. Asuna cried out, and her body started to shake and jump. Without regard for that, I kneaded the little knob that was peeking out from the top of the slit with my thumb, while spreading it open with two fingers. Ah, ha. It appeared that Asuna could no longer speak as she dug her nails into my back and arched her back as far as she could. Ah, ha. No, I can't take it anymore. But in another sense, I was also at my limit. I wanted to see every single part of Asuna so badly that I pushed her down onto the bed and grabbed her legs, spreading them apart. What? Asuna came out of a hazy state and bucked her body to escape as she realized that she was in an extremely embarrassing position. But there was no way I was going to loosen my grip now. What? Kirito, don't look so closely. Asuna. I raised my head and looked steadily into Asuna's eyes. Should we turn on the light? No. Asuna forcefully rejected my suggestion as she shook her crimson red face. Giving up, I devoted myself to examining Asuna's hidden place. The soft and fluffy pubes were pure white and smooth, without a single hair growing there. This was, to say, rather than a preference of the developers, a limitation of the system itself. Hairy type objects are of the extremely heavy category. As a result, aside from hair on the head and beards, there was absolutely no hair anywhere on the bodies of the SAO players. In between the two smooth mounds was a single slit, and further into there were light-colored folds. From time to time, a clear fluid dripped out and flowed towards Asuna's anus before turning into beads of light and disappearing. Whether it was from embarrassment or loss of strength, Asuna had stopped struggling, so I took my hand off her right foot and slowly spread the slit open. "Ma!" Asuna's eyes turned vacant as she moaned softly. Inside the slit, compared to the information that I had received from the net in the real world, was an unusually simple design with what I thought was peach-colored membrane spreading smoothly on the inside and bottom. The vaginal opening, which tirelessly produced clear fluid, was quietly throbbing, and in the upper part where the slit closed together, a little protrusion peeked its head out. Within SAO, the male players must have at least once or twice racked their brains in wondering what the part of the female player looked like, but I was experiencing a certain kind of emotion having just discovered the answer to this question. Of course, in my own lower half, there was also a certain thing, which having swelled to its limits, was seeking release. But this was the first time since I had entered SAO that it had become like this. There is a somewhat interesting story concerning all of this. I apologize for digressing, but when SAO was under development, the Argas company had an internal closed alpha test phase, during which time they reasoned that players would have no use for genitals, so it would not be necessary to objectify it. However, in reality, they found that most of the male testers would experience a certain amount of severe anxiety. Even so, while there was no problem when playing for several hours, when they conducted consecutive tests over a 48-hour period, they found that most of the male testers who attended this trial period were unable to stand not having their genitals and gave up. So it was from the beta testing phase that the genital parts were implemented out of a sense of necessity. It seems that this was also part of the reason why SAO players were not allowed to change their characters' genders. However, even if you had your genital parts, the question that I had prior to the official start of the game, meaning before the incident, was whether or not there would be anxiety over the lack of proper function. I myself had agonized repeatedly on multiple occasions over the inability to release my pent-up energy. But now I saw that if the ethics code, or whatever, was disabled, then functionality, probably even ejaculation, was possible. While feeling like I had missed out on a lot by not knowing all of this until now, at this point, though, I faced a new question. Having the ethics code release function basically meant that online virtual sex had been planned with the release of the game. SAO had many underage players, such as myself, so, no matter how I thought about it, this function was sure to cause a lot of social outcry. While teasing Asuna's cute slit with my fingertips, I raised my head and posed that very question to her. What? Though she had a spaced-out look in her silky eyes, and her answer was punctuated by her heavy breathing, Asuna's serious disposition kicked in as she answered me. That's...
They plan to use SAO's system in order to provide a personal sex service. We're probably linked with that function.
I see. In other words, it's probably one of those dedicated arrangements. Well enough with the chit-chat. I used my left hand to open Asuna up as wide as possible. She wasn't immobilized anymore, but Asuna let out a sweet cry with both of her legs spread wide in the air. I brought my face close and gently pushed my tongue towards the little hole in the center. Asuna shook her head from side to side as she cried out. I softly stimulated the entrance to that hole with my tongue as I pushed my finger in and out.
No, not that.
Every time Asuna convulsed, a large amount of fluid would make a sticky sound on my tongue as it leaked out of her vagina. Having pushed my tongue into her hole and enjoyed the feeling of her constricting around me, I pushed myself up over Asuna. I was already swollen to my limit and felt like I would end up coming if I continued to explore Asuna's body anymore. While softly playing with her pert nipple, I covered Asuna's lips with my own and softly whispered, "Asuna, can I?" Asuna nodded vigorously as she let out a hot breath.
Yes, make me full with your thing, Kirito.
Feeling slightly dizzy at the thought of having that straight-laced, invincible warrior tell me that with such a tearful face, I pressed myself against Asuna's moistness. My penis caught at the entrance of her vagina as I moved it up and down. Asuna firmly gripped my shoulders with her arms as she squeezed her eyes closed and furrowed her eyebrows. Even in the pale blue darkness of the room, I could see that her whole body was flushed and beads of sweat shined everywhere. When I placed my hands at Asuna's sides, her hips moved slightly forward. I felt a slight resistance, but with a popping sensation, half of my penis was swallowed up inside of Asuna. Even with just that, Asuna let out a scream as she arched her body to its limit. At the same time, my breath caught, and I felt the numbness spreading from my penis to the rest of my body. Having pushed my entire length into Asuna, I let my desires take over as I continued to penetrate her bit by bit. Asuna continued to scream as she continued to vigorously shake her head while her body shook. Although I briefly wondered if it hurt, I was no longer able to stop my hips from moving as my penis continued to plunge into Asuna's deepest parts with a wet, slapping noise. Eventually, my penis pushed all the way into the root of Asuna's vagina. While she was the woman whom I knew the best and I loved the most, the crazy thought that I was deep inside Ironcrad's top idol at this moment was spinning around my mind, making me go crazy. I somehow managed to calm my breathing as I put my mouth close to Asuna's ear and said, "It's all inside. Does it hurt?"
No, so hot. I'm gonna melt.
Asuna answered me in a thin, high voice as she shook her head.
Kirito, so much of you inside me.
I also felt like melting from the incredible heat that I was experiencing. My penis, which was tightly gripped by Asuna, was continuously sending heat waves up my back that exploded into fireworks in my head. I was aware of Asuna's moans becoming higher and higher as I was immobilized, struggling against the sensations that threatened to overwhelm me, as if in anticipation her slit also continued to tightly massage me with its convulsions.
No. No way. Again.
Asuna's voice, which sounded as if she was becoming delirious from the heat, was changing into a meltingly sweet sound, and
No, again. I'm coming.
she threw her head back with a jerk and, screaming loudly, Asuna climaxed for the second time. At the same time, my penis was squeezed with an incredible pressure, and to my horror, I felt a raging sense boiling up inside me, seeking release. Quotation mark, exclamation point, quotation mark. I bit my lip and fought against that feeling, supported by the thought that I couldn't relax when we hadn't even reciprocated once. I was somehow able to quell the urge. Panting heavily, I embraced Asuna's body, which was limp from orgasm. I knew I didn't have much time left, so I violently pulled all the way back to the opening of her vagina before pushing in all the way in one thrust. Smack. Our bodily fluids flew about. Asuna's eyes flew open as she let out a shriek.
No, if you do that, I'm going to go crazy. ...
I was once again forced to stop while deep inside Asuna. The hot, soft sensation surrounded me as the throbbing of the folds penetrated my entire being. Asuna had come several times already, and if we stayed like this, I would eventually end up coming. But I didn't feel like that would be a very good way to finish, so after thinking for a moment, I gently began shifting my body. Lifting up a drowsy-looking Asuna's body, I moved underneath. Eventually, the two of us switched positions, with me on my back and Asuna in a mounted position on top of me. As soon as Asuna realized what sort of position she was in, her face turned even redder as she shook her head from side to side.
No, this is embarrassing.
Asuna, you try moving.
What? Okay.
Asuna blushed shyly as she nodded and began to gently rock her body.
I'm sorry that I'm the only one feeling good. Kirito, you can come too.
A sticky sound was coming from the slit that was being pierced by my penis. Asuna's movements were minimal, but the powerful numbing feeling was spreading throughout my body again. Right when I thought, at this rate, I'm gonna come right away. Her voice was once again mixed with the sound of arousal. Asuna bit down on the fingers of her right hand as she moved her hips up and down.
Why am I, like this?
Asuna's long chestnut-colored hair flew into the air every time she shook her head. Beads of sweat also flew about, turning into light before disappearing.
I'm sorry, Kirito. I'm, coming.
Asuna threw her body back while drawing out the last part of her sentence as she violently convulsed 2, 3 times. Her breasts, which were sticking out in front of her, danced in time with those motions. I was in no position to pause and admire the sight of Asuna with her eyes scrunched closed and her teeth gritted together, looking incredibly cute yet horribly lewd, all at the same time. As Asuna's vagina gripped my penis tightly, I was once again assaulted with the powerful urge to come. Thinking that I wouldn't be able to resist it this time, I instinctively pushed up into Asuna's core with abandon. Gripping her hips with my hands, I shoved my hard penis in as far as I could before pulling out again. Being suddenly assaulted right after coming All Asuna could do was frantically writhe about. I took her hand, which was extended towards me, and linked our fingers together. Every time I stirred up Asuna's insides, our overflowing juices would fly about as the place of our joining melted in endless heat.
Ah, amazing, amazing.
Her bouncing breasts also sent large amounts of sweat flying about. Asuna was letting out delirious, sweet moans with a completely melted look on her face.
Ah, 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 ah.
I'm come.
Ah, yes. Let it out. Ah, Kirito, let out a lot.
As I shoved myself into Asuna, I released all of the pent-up sensations that I had stretched to the limits. Asuna. I could feel my hot sperm gushing deep into Asuna as she trembled in yet another climax. 2 years' worth of semen made a glopping noise as it flowed endlessly into Asuna. Every time my penis twitched, fireworks would go off in my head. After receiving all that I had to give her, Asuna's strength gave out as she fell on top of me. I gently embraced Asuna while she continued to gasp and convulse, as if she was being stimulated by the fluids inside her body as my consciousness dimmed.